In the dead of night, alarms erupted across one of Russia's most sensitive military installations, Nuke Base 22. Radar screens lit up with chaos, defenses scrambled, and Russian operators thought they were under ordinary drone harassment. But this was no simple swarm. Within minutes, what began as static on their monitors exploded into the most daring assault of the entire war. A Ukrainian strike, improvised, desperate, yet brilliantly executed, had penetrated the heart of Russia's nuclear bastion, and what followed was nothing short of catastrophic. The story begins not in Russia, but in Ukraine, just hours before the assault, when Moscow attempted a devastating blow to Ukraine's own drone industry. That attack, intended to cripple Kyiv's technological lifeline, instead triggered a chain of events that escalated into one of the most consequential nights of the war. The opening move came swiftly. Just before dawn, Russian warships in the Black Sea fired 6-caliber cruise missiles, each moving at nearly 600 miles per hour. The strike wasn't random. The missiles were timed perfectly with jamming drones that had infiltrated Ukrainian airspace only minutes before. Their targets were 3 of Ukraine's most critical drone plants, 2 in Dnipro and 1 in Pava, facilities producing hundreds of reconnaissance and strike UAVs every week. Ukraine's defenses scrambled. Newly delivered Patriot PAC-3 batteries, still in the middle of software calibration, managed to shoot down 4 of the incoming missiles, but 2 slipped through. At 4:49 a.m., disaster struck. One missile slammed into Plant 17 Ampere in eastern Dnipro, detonating near the main assembly hangar. The explosion triggered a chain reaction across the factory floor. 5 senior engineers were killed instantly, more than 20 others wounded, and over $60 million worth of equipment and unfinished drones went up in flames. Power lines melted from the heat, and satellite images later revealed nothing but a charred wasteland where Ukraine's drone lifeline once stood. But this wasn't just a factory lost, it was an attempt to erase Ukraine's innovation from the battlefield. By striking these drone facilities, Moscow wanted to blunt Ukraine's greatest equalizer, cheap, creative, and effective UAV technology that had frustrated Russia's superior numbers for months. What Moscow didn't anticipate was what came next. The destruction of Plant 17 was not the end of the story. It was the spark that ignited Operation Black Swarm. Just 6 hours later, inside a dim underground bunker near Kharkiv, Ukrainian commanders, engineers, and tacticians gathered around battered tables under the dim hum of emergency generators. The air was heavy with smoke from hastily lit lamps, and outside the bunker, the country was still reeling from the factory strike. But here, in that cramped war room, a new plan was born. The mission was simple in words, impossible in execution. Strike back at Russia, not just anywhere, but at one of its most strategic nuclear bases. Operation Black Swarm would not be a desperate retaliation with a few homemade drones. It would be a multi-domain, layered assault combining old Soviet explosives, modern Western artillery, and improvised drones into a storm designed to overwhelm even the most hardened defenses. One officer summed it up bluntly: "We don't have stealth bombers. We don't have limitless missiles. What we do have is imagination, and tonight imagination fights back." At 10:05 a.m., the first wave of Operation Black Swarm lifted off. 15 jury-rigged electronic warfare drones cobbled together from civilian parts flew low across the terrain, their crude jammers flooding Russian radar frequencies with static. Above them, MiG-29 fighters roared into the sky, dropping decoy flares and baiting Russian sensors into switching on. The target, Nuke Base 22. Ringed with Pantsir-S one-gun missile systems and Tor-M2 interceptors, the base was supposed to be nearly impenetrable. Yet within minutes, Ukrainian interference scrambled radar screens inside the Russian command bunkers. Tracks turned to static, phantom blips appeared everywhere, and defensive batteries wasted ammunition firing at ghosts in the sky. For nearly 5 minutes, an eternity in combat, Russia's nuclear fortress was blind, and that was exactly the opening Ukraine needed. At 1:12 a.m., while Russian operators still struggled to regain their systems, the second wave swept in. This wasn't just jamming signals, this was raw destruction duct taped together. 40 improvised suicide drones, each carrying a 30-pound Soviet TM-62 anti-tank mine, raced toward the base from 3 different directions. These drones weren't meant to survive. They were designed to detonate even if intercepted. Russian Panzer batteries finally found their mark and began shredding the incoming swarm. But each interception was a trap. When the drones were hit, the mines exploded in midair, hurling razor-sharp shrapnel through radar dishes and sensor towers. Within minutes, 2 Panzer systems were shredded beyond repair, and Russian crews were either wounded or forced to flee. At the same time, Ukrainian artillery crews positioned 25 miles away launched precision-guided rockets from HIMARS and M777 howitzers. Their salvos slammed into fuel depots, vehicle staging areas, and dugout barracks around the base perimeter. Russian defenders were left fighting blind and deaf, overwhelmed by both the drone swarm and the pounding artillery. The once impenetrable shield of Nuke Base 22 was cracking open. By 1:18 a.m., with Russian radar fractured, Ukraine unleashed the third and deadliest wave. 70 suicide drones roared into the night sky, splitting into 3 attack corridors. Each carried only 5 to 10 pounds of explosives, small individually, but devastating in swarms. High overhead, Ukrainian MiGs circled, their radars locked onto the last surviving Russian emitters. At the exact moment the swarm reached the inner perimeter, the jets fired AGM-88 HARM missiles at supersonic speeds. The remaining Russian radars vanished in a storm of fireballs. On the ground, Ukrainian Leopard 2 tanks and T-64s surged forward, tearing into Russian outposts. Armored vehicles were picked off, bunkers flattened, and defenders scattered in confusion. Inside the base, chaos consumed everything. Drones slammed into parked trucks, ignited fuel tankers, and tore through damaged air defense systems, causing chain reactions of exploding ammunition. Barracks burned, radar towers crumbled, and armored vehicles erupted into fireballs. For Russian troops at Nuke Base 22, this was no longer a battle. It was a nightmare. At 1:24 a.m., the assault reached its catastrophic climax. Some drones dove into fuel depots, igniting fireballs that lit the night sky for miles. Others smashed into the command bunker's ventilation shafts, collapsing sections of the underground headquarters. Still more ripped through hardened hangars, reducing long-range bombers into flaming wreckage. And then, the unthinkable happened. One drone, flying lower than the rest, penetrated the nuclear fuel processing wing. Its detonation did not trigger a nuclear blast, but it unleashed a chemical reaction so violent it equaled the force of a 500-pound bomb. Entire bunkers cracked, steel doors blew apart, and vast sections of the facility caved in. A fireball hundreds of feet high rose into the night sky. The ground shook violently, sending dust and debris raining down on fleeing soldiers. For 7 hours, Nuke Base 22 went silent. No signals, no transmissions, nothing but smoke, fire, and chaos. By dawn, the destruction was undeniable. Entire bomber wings lay in twisted ruins. Fuel depots still burned uncontrollably. Sections of the command bunker had collapsed completely. Hundreds of Russian troops and technicians were killed, and billions of dollars in strategic equipment erased in a single night. Ukraine had done the unthinkable, crippled one of Russia's crown jewel nuclear bases. The fallout was immediate. Moscow was forced to reroute nuclear command authority to backup nodes, leaving its deterrence weakened for days. NATO raised alert levels across Eastern Europe. Global oil prices spiked nearly 9% as markets reeled from the shock of nuclear instability. What began as Russia's attempt to wipe out Ukraine's drone plans had backfired catastrophically, turning into a global crisis. And yet, deeper questions lingered. If one wave of improvised drones and combined arms could dismantle a nuclear fortress, what other sites were truly safe? The war in Ukraine has repeatedly shown that innovation can shatter assumptions of invulnerability. Nuke Base 22 was supposed to be untouchable. Instead, it became a symbol, a reminder that in modern warfare, even nuclear strongholds can fall to creativity, coordination, and sheer determination. And as the smoke settled over Belgorod, one chilling truth remained. If this was just one operation, what storm might come next?